Welcome back to the Paranormal Girl podcast. I am your host, Kristen. Poltergeists traditionally begin with a whisper, not a bang. Mysterious activity that is easily overlooked, for a time, until it can no longer be ignored. That was not the case with the subject of today's show. Joel Stern, translator of the Elusive Force, joins us today to discuss one of the wildest and yet most compelling cases of a poltergeist I have ever heard. After my guest spent decades trying to have his translation published, this is a story of which many in the English-speaking world are only now becoming aware. It begins in 1980s Poland and centers around a 13-year-old girl and her family who suddenly fall under attack by an unseen and threatening force. Over the course of 7 long years, many would be witness to this activity, including physicians, law enforcement officials, neighbors, friends, teachers, journalists. Though attempts were made to study the activity and its strange effects, her successful telepathic abilities, impossible yet undeniable metal bending capabilities, doctors and scientists involved in this case would be left with nothing but more questions and some theories as to the cause. Please enjoy my conversation with Joel Stern.
I'm a translator by profession who has an interest in certain, I guess you would call it, New Age subjects, such as reincarnation, time slips, UFOs, paleoarchaeology, and so forth. And I've read pretty widely in this field. How did I find out about this particular case? I was working at the U.S. State Department in Washington as a translator in the Office of Language Services. I specialized in Slavic languages, such as Russian, Polish, Ukrainian, Czech, and so forth, but I worked in a number of other languages as well. I found out about the case sometime in late 1988. I had made the acquaintance of a Polish couple, a bioenergy therapist named Mieczysław Wierkus and his wife Margaret, who was a journalist. Margaret gave me a copy of this book. She knew that I was, translated from Polish, and he told me that an American publisher might be interested in bringing out this particular book on paranormal, phenomena, specifically a poltergeist case in Poland. And I read the book and was fascinated, and I agreed with her that the case be brought to the attention of the English-speaking public, since it was not widely known outside of Poland. That's how I found out about this, particular case.
Okay.
Would you like to ask me any more questions?
Yes.
Background or
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about your translation background? You worked for the U.S. government doing that, right?
Well, I worked in a number of fields as a medical proofreader, freelance translator, occasional editor, and in 1985 I started work at the State Department in Washington, and the agency that I mentioned, the Office of Language Services, which handles all matters relating to foreign language correspondence from leaders of other countries, private citizens, negotiations of treaties, a very wide range of subject material. And I work mostly with Russian, Polish, and Ukrainian.
Okay.
So that's my career in a nutshell. And I worked there for 28 and a half years.
Whoa. Well, what is odd to me or sticks out to me about this trajectory was you said you were introduced to this by a Polish couple, introduced to this
Yes.
case, but it's it's this seems like such a jump to make this decision to, go from 28 years working in the State Department, translating all of these official documentation, to translating a poltergeist case. How familiar were you, or were you very versed or familiar at that time with specifically poltergeist activity, poltergeist phenomena?
Um, I was not versed at all.
Okay.
I had a general interest in unconventional subjects, as I mentioned before, and well, I had an interest in Polish culture and literature, and this case fit, well, I should say fit within my particular field of interest.
Okay. Okay.
I met the couple in Virginia, not in Poland itself. They emigrated.
Mhm.
So I had never heard of this particular phenomenon before, and it struck me not only as a case of scientific merit, but also human interest story. How does a young, 13-year-old girl deal with a phenomenon of such, incredible strangeness?
Right.
And how did her peers, the society in general, react to her? Um, so, for that reason, I thought the case is worth, bringing to public attention.
Right. Right. There at the beginning, like, you could immediately see all these aspects to it, the human interest aspect, the scientific aspect. Did you have any reservations at all? Any skepticism at all? Like, was there ever any eyebrow raised there at the beginning, or were you just taken by the story?
Well, I had an open mind. I would not describe myself as a believer,
Mhm.
an uncritical believer, but I'm not a diehard skeptic.
Right.
I'm agnostic in regard to such things. I have an open mind. I went to Poland after I translated the book, by the way, and met the authors who were well-known investigative journalists. In fact, Marek Mamushko, the co-author, was head of the Polish Journalist Association, so he had some credibility. And I met his wife, who was also a journalist, and they took me to meet Joasia Gajewski, the subject of the book, in 1989 and 1990. And I spoke to a couple of eyewitnesses. I met her family. I spoke to her personally. I had no reason to doubt their honesty.
Right.
And I saw the damage in their apartment that had been caused by this violent activity.
Well, can you describe that? You know what? Before you describe that, I
Yes,
feel like let's back up and let's
sure.
introduce everybody to this story. What are we talking about? Tell us the overview of the case of Joasia Gajewski.
Well, I'll try to uh, summarize it as briefly as I can. It was a complex phenomenon that continued for 7 years, and certainly we're not going to cover every aspect of it. But the story begins actually in late 1982. Joasia Gajewski, a 13-year-old teenager in sixth grade, had just lost her grandmother, and she was, very upset by this. She was very close to this grandmother, and shortly afterwards, in the spring of 1983, um, inexplicably and suddenly, a poltergeist phenomenon occurred around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. A violent explosion of activity, such as flying objects, battering the wall, and other strange phenomena occurred. And um, these occurrences were witnessed, first of all, by neighbors, uh, fellow tenants in the apartment building where this family was living. Um, I should mention that this family was in no way involved in occult or paranormal a father, Anjay, was a plumber. Her mother was a telephone operator, and as I mentioned, Joasia was an ordinary schoolgirl. There's no evidence that they were, dabbling in any kind of sorcery or use of Ouija boards. So, of course, the authorities were alerted to these occurrences, and there was great initial skepticism. Police were called in, and a policeman was posted in their apartment, and he eventually, witnessed some of these effects, these violent psychokinetic effects. And other municipal authorities appeared. Chief architect of the town of Sosnowiec, which is in southern Poland, came to investigate. He and other municipal officials also became eyewitnesses. That was the first stage. The spring of 1983. That marked the beginning of the whole Gajewski phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. And then it really took some interesting turns after that. It caught the attention of a couple of spans of time where they actually would study Joasia in depth, in detail, because it got to a point so many people were involved, so many credible sources, and under observation, it was seen that this activity, this phenomena that was occurring around her could not be explained in what we would think of as a logical sense. So I want to dig into those studies in just a moment, but let me ask you this. So the case, the activity at least, began in 83. You translated the book from Polish into English in 89?
I started either in late 88
Mm-hmm.
or the very beginning of 1989, and the translation took me about 7 to 8 months. I finished in the summer of 89. Yes.
Okay. Why are we in the English speaking world, why are we only hearing about this case now, like recently?
That's a very pertinent question, and I'll explain it. There are a couple factors. There's a language barrier.
Mm.
This case was not so widely known outside of Poland precisely because of that. Also, there was a brief media frenzy in 1983. The case had become known to some journalists outside of, Poland, in Europe, and even in Japan. But the co-authors of the book and the family itself were very concerned about the girl's welfare. Remember, she was 13 years old. She was a student, and they did not want all this media attention affecting her emotional well-being. It was just becoming too overwhelming to everyone concerned. So that's the second factor. Why did it take so long for this case to come out? Well, my experience of the publishing industry is such that it was very difficult for me to break through with my translation. I sent my manuscript to maybe 8 to 10 publishers, and the reaction was always the same. Case fascinating, translation very good, not enough publicity. So those are the factors at play.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to break through if you don't have name recognition or money or connections.
Right. Well,
It's a sad fact, but it's still, this case, this, problem with the publishing industry is still relevant today. Mainstream publishers are not reluctant to accept any kind of material for which there's no guarantee of
Right.
uh, great profit.
Yeah. Yeah. It just, it makes me wonder how many other cases are out there that,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's the whole point of my argument. Because of these language barriers, there may be cases all over the world that we never hear about
Hmm.
because of they may take place in countries, let's say Burma or Central Africa, where either there's not scientific establishment doesn't exist, to a large extent, or there's a lack of interested publishers. It's a great shame.
Yeah.
We never hear about this because of these various hindrances.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. It is such a shame. It's a disservice because I feel like I've been in depth studying the paranormal for going on 4 years now at this level. And these are the types of cases that really bring me over to that side of being able to say for certain there really is something going on. Reality is not what we think it is. There's a mystery here that we really need to unravel. We really need to investigate. Um, but we still run up against the wall by the skeptical side because these cases they may sit in obscurity for years or forever. They may never come out. So it is such a shame. Um, how long did this case last? Like when did it finally start to
From the spring of 1983 to sometime late in 1990. I don't know the exact date of uh, um, cessation of these phenomena, but it was sometime late in 1990. In other words, a period of 7 years, which is quite extraordinary
it is.
in the annals of parapsychology from what I've heard. Most poltergeist cases last for a few months to maybe a year,
Right.
especially among adolescents, teenage girls who are going through the stage of puberty. The interesting thing about the Joasia Gajewski case is that the psychokinesis and other strange phenomena occurred even after the stage of puberty. So
Mhm. Right.
no real explanation for that. Why in her particular instance, you know, again, we're dealing with hypotheses. We still have no, clear-cut explanation.
Yeah. Yeah. They certainly try they put out quite a few very interesting hypotheses there, which can be read in the book in the appendix section. Nobody nobody seems to be able to agree, but these credible scientific medical uh, persons who were part of this case found it compelling enough to actually go that extra mile and put out these hypotheses about what was actually taking place. It's still a mystery. It's still a mystery. We don't know, but this adds to this case specifically adds to that body of evidence, I think, and can really help us in other cases as they come forth, or in other subjects entirely. Tying things together, which might be something I'll bring up with you a little bit later, an interesting connection. Um, are you aware of any other poltergeist case that has lasted this long or longer, or are we discussing the longest lasting known case?
Well, I can't speak with authority on the
Mhm.
subject. Well, according to Dr. Richard Brown, he was the head of the Rhine Research Institute
Mhm.
in North Carolina, he said it's almost unique in certain aspects, especially the duration and the violence of the psychokinetic effects. Whether there are other cases that lasted as long, it's very possible. I told you that there's um, hindrances we have to publicizing, to bringing light to such, phenomena to the public because of the language barriers and so forth. So there might well have been, or there may be even now, similar occurrences. We just don't hear about them.
Right.
Remember, it took me 34 years to find a publisher.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that in itself is almost paranormal. The experiences I went through, I mean, that's worth an article in itself,
Yeah.
really.
Well, good on Anomalist Books for
Yes.
taking you up on it. They saw the gold that is here that you were offering, and they did a good thing with that.
I should mention that I never even heard of that publisher. I sent my manuscript out to various researchers. One of them, Anna Lisa Ventola, who's head of the Parapsychology Association. She was interested in the case after reading my manuscript and recommended that I send my translation to Patrick Wiege, who is the owner of Anomalist Books in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's a niche publisher. They have a very good catalog of paranormal theme subjects.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I sent my manuscript to Mr. Wiege, and he was taken by the subject and thought that it ought to be published.
Yeah.
And this was in the fall of 2022, I believe. Yeah, 2022, exactly 2 years ago. So after many false starts, I happened to, luck out with Mr. Wiege. He thought the subject was worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was not wrong. Thank you for persisting in this. Everybody needs a champion, and I think you were that for this. Um, Taking it back here to the beginning, like you mentioned, the state of Poland at that time, it was very conservative.
Yes.
I know it was like heavily, it was
Still is to a large extent.
right.
Overwhelming Catholic country where the clergy play a very major role in public policy.
Well, at the time that this, it really, this activity was really coming out. It was making headlines. There were quite a few explanations at that time. People, some logical explanations and also some very illogical explanations. Looking from the outside in, can you tell us a little bit about what were people trying to explain this as at the
Well, in
time?
the initial stage, there was hypothesis that the phenomena in question were caused by underwater, underground water courses, so-called ley lines, energy fields, what have you, that may have triggered the explosion of these violent effects.
Hmm.
And so construction engineers, architects were brought in to investigate, inspect the building. No defects, no major construction defects were found. And the girl and her parents were relocated to another apartment. And the effects continued in this different apartment. So apparently the cause was not any defect in the construction of their apartment building.
Right.
Well, of course, there was
And this is when the first span of testing and experimentation would take place with Yoasha, and it was from reading it
Yes.
in the book, it was very, very in-depth testing. It was repeatable results on some of them. Just really, really interesting stuff. Are you able to give us some examples of the types of things that they were testing her with, and how those results were looking to them?
Well, the physicians involved tested her, and well, her parents as well for any possible anomalies, physical anomalies, their psychological makeup, whether all that might have a bearing on this particular case, the origin, nature of the phenomena, and psychologically, the parents were found to be well, no significant deviations from what's considered the psychological norm, although the mother was extremely nervous, which is understandable given the damage being caused in their apartment constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the girl was found to have certain, say, patterns in her functioning of her cerebral hemispheres, which resembled epilepsy, although she did not display symptoms of, full-blown epilepsy. There were some anomalies found in the transfer of after images from one hemisphere to another. That's, of course, that's a very complicated subject, which I won't go into right now, but that's one possible hypothesis that her the puberty-related hormonal changes might have triggered these psychokinetic effects. But
Mm-hmm.
that's a hypothesis because all teenagers go through puberty. Why, in her case, did it result in, you know, a poltergeist manifestation?
Right.
Again, there was no explanation for it. There was one hypothesis that it's still prevalent that poltergeist can, if not necessarily, do arise from the interaction of hormonal changes with emotional turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
But again, is that an all embracing, always infallible hypothesis? I doubt it because, as I said, teenagers go through puberty and many have emotional turmoil. Why, in her case, did this manifest in such violent physical effects?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
We still don't know.
And this was she would get to introduce to the observers her ability to bend metal. And this is more so what I was talking about with repeatable. I specifically remember from the book, like she was doing this dozens and dozens of times, the same ways over and over again.
Oh,
And
but not unfailingly. Remember,
right.
she,
Yes.
this was not she's not an automaton who could bend objects at will.
Hmm.
It depended on her attitudes towards the observers, the specialists who were investigating the case. If she had a good rapport, generally she was able to do this. But if she froze up, then the experiment would fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no. I'm just thinking out loud that does point to, for me at least, that it is very much dependent on something inside of her that is very distinct from other people. Like it comes down to her, maybe her emotions, something at the cellular level, something about her specifically, not other teenagers, that is producing this stuff. Yeah, just thinking out loud on that. But as far as the bending of the metal, I'm hoping you can describe this because I guess I'm familiar with like Uri Geller. at the time, or other people who claim to do this feat. And there's so many ways to explain it away and be skeptical
I
about
know,
it.
I know.
Yeah.
That's the major criticism of this
Yeah.
particular case, actually. A very
Really?
frequent reaction. Well, professional musicians like, of course, the Amazing Randy being the most well-known example,
Mm-hmm.
would allegedly do this. It's a parlor trick. Not worth any scientific credibility. But I should mention that she was studied over a period of 40 months under laboratory conditions by metallurgists who, filmed these experiments. Not only spoons, but all sorts of metal objects, massive communication cables. I went, as I mentioned to you before, I met Joasia and her family twice. She bent two steel spoons right before my eyes.
Wow.
It took her a couple of minutes. She rubbed the handle of the spoon with one or two fingers, and they drooped like wilted flowers. And I watched her carefully. I still have these spoons, by the way, as souvenirs of my only paranormal experience. And I actually tried to bend one of these massive communication cables that was on the coffee table, in the family apartment. I don't think the strongest man in the world could have bent it in this way. It's impossible.
They yeah, they can't. They can't. I was looking at some of the pictures that are included in the book. This is to do that to any, any of the metal pieces that she was producing the bends in. There's in my mind, at least to my knowledge, there's only two ways to do that, and that is by sheer physical force, some kind of force, whether person or machinery, to bend it that way, or heat, right? And neither
Yes,
of those were seen in this case. Like when you say she was rubbing two fingers
right.
against them.
The handle, not
Y-
the spoons. Yes.
yes, yeah, that's all she was doing, and they were wilting like flowers. That's a really good
It
way to
took a
put it.
couple of minutes, but the spoons are twisted like pretzels.
Hmm.
I can't move them. I try, I and other people have tried to unbend them. It's impossible. So if she was performing some kind of trick or hoax, I'd like to find an explanation.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Remember, a 13-year-old girl. She was not a professional musician, magician like Randy or other people. Uh, if there was a hoax involved in this, I'd like to find a credible explanation.
yeah, yeah.
How was she able to trick these teams of researchers over a period of 40 months, not to mention numerous credible eyewitnesses such as teachers, police officials, municipal authorities, physicians, nurses? Were all these people delusional? Were they colluding in a hoax? Or were they totally clueless? I tend to give them the benefit of the doubt that something was genuine was going on that defies explanation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I do too. One detail that is mentioned in the book after this was happening, and yeah, she wasn't consistent because it was based on how she was feeling towards the observers or how she was feeling at the time. But stepping out as an observer point of view, like it was a repeatable thing she was able to do, and the metallurgists. It's only mentioned once in the book, but this dropped my jaw open. They actually studied the bent portion.
Yes, I was going to mention that.
Oh,
There is
okay,
a
please.
difference in the atomic structure
Mhm.
of objects bent through the use of mechanical force or heat and objects bent paranormally. I can't explain that. It's called slippage and twinning, if that means anything to the scientists who may be listening to this program. But there's a definite structural crystalline anomaly in objects bent, paranormal phenomena.
Yeah.
And that was true in her case.
Mhm. Yeah. Changed at an
Yes,
atomic level changed.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the stuff, Joel. That is the stuff for me. All right. So I think we've illuminated folks on this first kind of period of study, intense study that they were doing with her. Uh, they because of the results of this span of time, the researchers, the people who were involved, they would ultimately reach out to the Ministry of Health and Social Welfare to propose establishing a program to further explore and research the phenomenon, because at that point they were certain, they were sure something was going on and it needs to be studied. That would not happen, unfortunately. But in 85, her physician, Dr. Gadula,
Yes.
he would take a position at a sanatorium and ask that Joasia stayed there for a time for further observation.
For about a month. See, he wanted to isolate Joasia from possible external influences, her family, friends. Just study her intensively for a
Mm-hmm.
period of a month under laboratory conditions. He thought that would be more conducive to, the scientific research.
Yeah.
That was his purpose.
Well, he may have been onto something. He may have been right in that aspect, because some of the most astounding activity that I read would take place at the sanatorium. Would you walk us through her time in room 309? What happened?
Okay, well, I should give a little background.
Okay.
Um, there was I mentioned in in the initial period of this case, there was some media attention, mostly sensationalist, surrounding the whole case. And Roger was invited to take part in this TV program called The Fun Fair, which rather lowbrow entertainment, like a variety show.
Mm-hmm.
The host of the program wanted her to bend spoons, kind of an entertainment ploy. She wasn't able to do so because she felt great stress, having to perform in public.
Right.
And she was, understandably distraught by her failure. And at the same time, she had heard about other cases in Poland where other um, children, teenagers, were supposedly performing paranormal feats. And she wanted to show that she had genuine abilities, that, she was jealous of these other teenagers whom she considered her competitors in a sense. So when she went to the sanitarium at Dr. Gadula's invitation, he decided that it was a good opportunity for her to actually demonstrate what she could do. So the day after she was, admitted to the sanitarium as a test subject, how should I say it? She completely demolished her room.
It's a good way to put it.
Over a period of less than half a minute, the sink was ripped out of the wall. The light fixture was smashed. Objects were flying around at weird trajectories. And in case anyone would think that Joasia was deliberately doing this, with some kind of instruments or, tools to, deceive the people around her. Well, that wasn't the case. It happened in less than 30 seconds. The eyewitnesses, physicians, other patients who rushed in, they found all these, destroyed objects, the shattered sink. How could she have done that? A teenage girl without the equipment.
Right.
And pictures were taken. This was not a masked illusion. These were actual physical effects. Photos were taken. One of them, I think, is reproduced in the book, if I'm not mistaken. The the twisted faucet.
The faucet, yes.
Yes, yes. That was, and other violent effects occurred during her stay at the sanitarium, which I should point out were witnessed by credible people, nurses, physicians, an engineering student, among others.
Okay. Okay.
Cases of, and also a case of teleportation, where a mirror flew from a hallway bathroom into Joasia's room, ending up shattered on the floor.
Yeah, that.
2 nurses observed this.
Yeah. Yeah. They were, as I recall, they were literally standing before the mirror, or just like right
Yes,
outside in the hallway, and talking
yes,
about the mirror that was
right,
needing to be cleaned.
exactly.
And then
And
with
it ended up in pieces in Joasia's room.
across the hall.
How did it
Yes.
get? How did it get through the wall or the door?
Through a closed door.
Teleportation.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, this is, yeah. So I'm glad that we highlighted that for my audience. It's hard to conceptualize, but when you read this book, listeners, you will understand why I'm very excited about this case. I'm very excited because there's just so much undeniable stuff to this activity, and it is clearly not a hoax. Um, and I just want to bring back up, like, the interviews that are held with all of the scientists and the specialists that were participating in the studies, at the medical professionals participating in studies. It is included in the appendix of the book, and I was just fascinated to read through all of their theories, because everybody had a theory that didn't. It was kind of extraordinary theories, but they were trying to put it through a lens of science, just advanced science. But it's just fascinating to me because a lot of these people, like you said, Joel, they started skeptically.
Yes.
They all had very interesting theories. Nobody could agree, again, but they all came to some theory, because bottom line, at the end of the day, they could not deny that something was happening and it was not a hoax.
Well, let me point out something that occurred to me personally, that poltergeist activity is a very complex phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
There may not be one cause. There may be several causes in the same case, or one cause in each specific case. Conceivably, I'm not saying I believe in this, but conceivably, there could be a supernatural factor.
Right.
Some kind of entity which originates this chain of events. Whether that's true in this particular case, I don't think so, but in other cases, I can't rule out that possibility.
Yeah.
But even if we admit that a supernatural entity is involved in a particular case, it doesn't explain why. Why this girl? Was it something about her configuration of her brain that attracted this entity?
Mm-hmm.
Why did it leave her after 7 years? Why not after 7 months? Why not after 3 years? All these. If we try to explain it with a supernatural factor, it raises other questions.
Right. Right.
You see, trying to explain an inexplicable event by referring to another inexplicable event or phenomenon, it just throws the can down the road.
Mm-hmm.
We're raising other questions that call for answers. I should mention that there are still people in the paranormal research community who believe in the supernatural explanation. The book was reviewed in the Australian Journal of Parapsychology by some guy named Rob Tilley. This was, I think it was late fall of 2023, and he said outright that Joasia had accessed what he called the higher dimensions of consciousness, which attracted the attentions of some entity, which caused these phenomena. And if a well-trained medium had been brought in, he could have resolved this problem quickly and easily. There would have been no need for scientific research, and there would have been no need for a book. That was his explanation. He had no grounds for asserting this. There was no evidence that Joasia had any, what he called access to higher consciousness, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
It was totally groundless speculation on his part.
Right. And I
I
presume,
think a
Mr.
scientific explanation is far more plausible.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. Well, no, in agreement with you, and especially when we have these little tiny, very scientifically based clues to it. Like we can look to some of the results that they got from the physical tests that they were the biophysical tests that they were looking at her
Yes.
with. The thing with the hemispheres in the brain, there was something abnormal about what they found. It wasn't detrimental to her. With the after images, like you said, it was abnormal compared to others, in other people. So these to me are like clues to a physical explanation for this, and just all the more points to there's something special about her inner biology. Something explainable, though.
Yes, interaction between her organism and the external environment,
Mhm.
whether it's a relationship with her parents or the loss of her grandmother or any number of factors. Maybe she had difficulties with her peers, difficulties with her, studies. It could have been a whole chain of causative, factors.
Right. Right.
How do you isolate one thing? We're dealing with a human being, not some sort of, mechanical device which you can take apart, and analyze each, element. It's very complex.
It is. Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up, the different theories in the paranormal world. That's what makes a subject like this so hard and such an enigma for folks. We cannot agree on this side as to the supernatural cause for a thing like this. And you're absolutely right. It's explaining a mystery with another mystery, and it just gets very screwy very quickly. But I am glad that you brought that up because that's something that I've been grappling with, definitely, specifically in this season. Is what does a poltergeist mean? What is that situation? Is it always the same? You bring up a good point that maybe it's not always the same thing. Maybe it's not. So that's something I'll be thinking about. That I appreciate that. Um, and I was gonna ask you, like, because you've obviously thought a lot about this, what could have caused this. I think we pretty much got your thoughts on that, but if you had anything to add in regards to your own personal, just with your interaction with this case, your interaction with the story, your own personal thoughts regarding what do you think is more probable as far as what could have caused this for you, Asha?
Well, I'm going to have to rely on the uh, judgments of people who've studied such phenomena professionally, not like Dr. Broughton or Guy Lyon Playfair, British
Mhm.
researcher who wrote a book on Enfield Poltergeist in England. Eberhard Bauer at the University of Freiburg, who's also studied such cases intensively. They take a scientific approach. They think that there's no need necessarily to refer to a supernatural manifestation of any kind, that there can be a scientific, I should say, a physical, emotional cause. No need to refer to anything beyond that. Of course,
Mhm.
in certain cases, there may be some kind of entity involved that may trigger the phenomena, but that wouldn't explain Joasia's telepathic abilities, um, which are also described in the book, and her ability to bend these metal objects. So, do I have a personal viewpoint on the cause and nature of this phenomenon? I'm just saying that it raises wider questions of the nature of consciousness co-authors Mark Ramushko and Anna Shitska wrote a follow-up to this book in 1994 called Return of the Elusive Force, in which they described the case of a patient who was comatose. He was brought into a hospital in Warsaw in an alcoholic stupor, and as soon as he entered the ward, extreme psychokinetic effects started occurring. And remember, this patient was in a coma. So how do you explain that? There was no conscious control over these effects. Was it some kind of demonic entity come into the hospital together with his patient? I think this book would be worth translating as well, but I have to see what kind of attention the Elusive Force, attracts before I undertake such a project.
Yeah.
Remember, it took me 34 years to find the publishers. But, so we're dealing with, questions of consciousness, not just this particular case, but the nature of reality itself.
Mm-hmm.
Are there higher or parallel levels of reality that impinge upon one another on special occasions, in states of emotional turmoil, physical, damage to the brain. So that's why I think the book is worthy of attention. We're dealing with the nature of consciousness and reality itself,
Yeah. Yeah.
not just with poltergeist activity.
Right. Right. No, this, and especially this case, because in other poltergeist cases, you will see aspects that are seen in this case, but only aspects, just here and
Yes.
there, similarities. This is one for the books. This is one for the ages, because it includes all of it. I feel like if we're going to start anywhere, this is a good one to launch from, because it does raise a bunch of really important questions. Yeah, absolutely. Just phenomenal. Joel, I just have one more question.
Sure.
And then we'll tell folks where to find the book. You have played such an important role in bringing this incredible story to light for not just a new generation, but an entirely different audience, an entirely new audience. After all this time, after everything, what do you hope comes of it?
Well, I hope it will attract the attention of researchers throughout the world who are open-minded and who are willing to take a serious approach to this entire question of consciousness as manifested in paranormal phenomena. And apart from the scientific aspect, I think that the general reader would be fascinated by human interests because this girl was confronted by a force which was beyond her control, and the reactions of her family and peers and community at large, I think, shed light on human behavior. How do people react when faced with the unknown? I think that's a very significant element in this whole story. What I'd like to see come out of it would be, I hope, a documentary film, or at least a TV episode that focuses attention on this particular case, but perhaps others as well that not come to light. To me, the whole subject is just fascinating. That's what I'd like to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to see all of that too. I would. All right. Where can folks learn more, where can they pick up a copy of The Elusive Force?
Okay, well, there are a number of ways to do that. You can order directly, excuse me, from Anomalist Books in Charlottesville, Virginia. And they have an online catalog which has a wide selection of subjects of interest to paranormal researchers and the general public. Or you can order it through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and other websites that you can easily find on Google. There's no problem. It's also available in digital form through Kindle and Kobo. And if anyone wants to contact me personally, Kristen, I can give my email.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, go ahead.
It's Joel Deco Stern, JoelDecostern @gmail.com. I'd be glad to answer any questions and send questions to the co-author who lives in Warsaw, Poland. Mark Mushko unfortunately passed away in 2019, but his wife, Anna Szczycka, lives in Warsaw. She publishes a magazine called The Unknown World, which deals with New Age subjects. So feel free to contact me.
All right. Yeah, no, I will be including links, and I will include that way to contact you as well in the show notes. But for now, that is going to be a wrap on our time together. Help me close this one out. Would you like to leave my audience with any final thoughts, words of wisdom, or a piece of advice?
Well, keep an open mind. Just keep an open mind. Strange things are happening all around us. And just remain curious and open-minded.
Very good. Very well said. Translator of The Elusive Force, Joel Stern, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Take care.
My gratitude to Joel for taking the time to come on the show and share his knowledge and thoughts about Joasia's case. Listeners, this is a story that needs to be heard, needs to be known. I do hope to see many of you pick up your own copies of The Elusive Force. In the intro to the season, I spoke about scientific study of poltergeist cases. Joasia's is one of the best examples of this, a mystery being so compelling and undeniable that even the professionals involved, many of which began skeptically, ultimately had to accept it was really taking place, even if they had no clear answers for it. And as it's stated in the book, either you have to believe that a good number of trained scientists, medical personnel, and journalists who were willing to put their reputations on the line and put their names to the reports were all liars or gullible fools, or you must accept that they were witness to phenomena for which contemporary science simply has no explanation. I've included a couple of links to buy the book, but I would ask that you please consider purchasing it directly through the publisher, Anomalist Books. They were the first to say yes, and are the reason we are able to consider Joel's incredible translation and are talking about Joasia Gajewski today. Let's show support to publishers who are willing to help get these kinds of stories out to the wider public. And if you have any questions about the case, as Joel mentioned, you can direct your email to joeldecostern@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to show your support for more just like it, please follow PGP on social and subscribe on YouTube @ParanormGirlPod. And it's really easy to forget or save it for another day, but there really is no better way to show support of your favorite programs than by sharing the episode link with a friend or leaving a rating and review wherever you podcast. That will be a wrap for today. Happy Halloween, everyone. And listen, poltergeists can strike at any time, can happen to anyone. So be sure you stay safe, keep the nightlight on, and sleep with one eye open.